Hey everybody, welcome to another edition of Sherloc's Roundtable. My name is RC Williams.
And I'm Julianna RC.
So this is our look at the world ripped from the headlines to help you keep up with what the heck's going on, because the world is moving at a breakneck pace. We have a special guest on the show today. Tim Sharp is with us. Now, Tim's an America First fighter, right? His fight, though, is huge. It has huge ramifications on the political machine that exists today. And, you know, Tim did everything he was supposed to do in running for office as someone who was new to that process. And even though he did that, he still got screwed. Let's be honest, right? Frankly, the guy got a bad deal. And we're here to talk about that today. So Tim Sharp, welcome to Sherlock's Roundtable.
Thanks for having me on today.
Yeah, it's great to have you, man. So, you know, we were talking before we got started here. We know the story, and we're going to get to that, right? The lawsuit and you doing what you need to do. But we want people to know who Tim Sharp is. So can you give us some background on you? What's the story for you and how you ended up ultimately running for office?
So, you know, really, I'm kind of just a simple guy. I have no political background whatsoever. Nobody in my family's ever ran for office. I moved to Florida in 2018 with Lowe's Home Improvement. I was a store manager and really just kind of watching the 2020 election. I thought, man, you know, we just need everyday citizens like Donald Trump to get up and fight for the freedom. So my initial kind of jump in was I had actually filed to run for a city council race in Palm Coast, Florida. Spoke to some great friends of mine, the Bowmans, Charles and Jessica Bowman, and they really encouraged me to take a step forward and file for a state race. So I withdrew from city council, jumped into a state house race, and the rest is history.
So I think a lot of people because there are a lot of people like you and us, like Julianna actually explored a run for Congress as well. We're like, we need to do something. What was that process like? And you can give us the version that you feel most comfortable with telling, but no experience, right? Some folks had encouraged you to do it, but what was the process like? Because that's going to lead to ultimately what happened to you.
So the process itself to file is not that complicated. You know, it was really just filling out some forms, mailing them off, making sure that the I's were dotted and the T's were crossed. And luckily along the way, I did pick up some great consultants that were actually running my campaign. I had a consulting firm called Mobilize the Message that was brought to the table to me by Anthony Sabatini. Anthony's a very good friend of mine and has been a great ally and really a great mentor for me. So that was kind of the process. You know, the initial part, not that complicated, but there is a lot of bureaucracy and red tape along the way.
So I think that gets to the crux of it, Tim, where you know, you went through the process and you, as we're doing this, the Epic Times has just done a feature piece on your story. And so you're going through the process. And as we read it, you were warned to make sure to cross all your T's, dot all your I's, make sure that you check all the boxes for what you're supposed to do, right? And you were under the impression, I think, that you had done that. So talk to us about what happened there when you went to file and everything like that.
So probably 2 weeks before qualifying day, one of my closest advisors, Jessica Bowman, had literally sent me a checklist. This is what you have to have. So as I'm getting ready to leave for Tallahassee, I went through the list. Do I have everything? Yes, I'm good. And then in Tallahassee, when I physically turned my paperwork in, they'd explained to me, yep, you should be good. And the gentleman that took my check actually asked me, is this check what's designated as your campaign account? And I said, yes, it is. But it did not have campaign account printed on the check. So they said I did not qualify for that reason.
Wow. So a technicality, quote unquote, I guess, right? But that's not the entire story, because as we read it, don't they have discretion? And then wasn't there something else that happened there? Yeah.
So by their own policy, if there is a discrepancy, they're supposed to contact you and give you an opportunity to rectify that situation. So on that particular day, the deadline was 12 p.m. to qualify. I turned my paperwork and it's date stamped, time stamped at 11:31 a.m. I actually stood in the parking lot in Tallahassee with Willie Montague until after 12 because we were concerned about the same type of issues. No one from Tallahassee ever reached out to me, period, not even after the fact. I had to physically drive back to Tallahassee to get an answer from them.
Wow. So everything was okay, quote unquote, until it wasn't okay.
So how did you find out that other people had technicalities that they allowed to pass through that you wasn't allowed to pass through?
That was actually on my way back from Tallahassee. You know, I left Tallahassee feeling really defeated, thinking, all right, you know, maybe if I screw up, you know, first time candidate, I'll own that. So as I'm driving back to Flagler County from Tallahassee, I started getting texts from the Bowmans of screenshots of other checks that were identical to mine.
Interesting. So for we, not for thee, I guess is the theme, right?
Right.
So if I understand correctly, Tim, there are other people that filed to run for office. Their applications were accepted, yet they were basically, it was the same thing that you did, but they were allowed to run and you weren't. Is that correct?
Absolutely. And it was Republicans and Democrats that had the same issues that I had.
Wow.
So we've got people that get to choose the winners and the losers from the very beginning, you know, who they want, which candidates they want to pass through and who they don't want to pass through. Oh, technicality. So Tim Sharp, we're not going to let him go through.
So Tim, what are your thoughts on why they decided that you were a bad egg?
So I think if you look at the bigger picture, I had chosen to challenge the incoming Speaker of the House, and it was protect that man at all costs. And I watched him right before qualifying day shift his messaging to all the things that I was saying. He started to really kind of parrot me, talking about constitutional carry, election integrity, things that he's never spoken about before.
What was he talking about before?
He wasn't talking at all.
Oh,
wow.
So that's what I've noticed, that some of the, you know, incumbents, they weren't talking about anything. They were behind the scenes and, you know, not really talking about what their campaign is all about. Why? Like, they're just waiting to see what other people are going to say and how the community is going to react to it to get that kind of feedback.
I think what you saw this year, especially in the state of Florida for the state house races, was there was an army of grassroots constitutional conservatives that rose up like never before.
Yeah.
And I think that really just shook the establishment.
So as RC said, you know, I looked into running for Congress and it didn't sit well with me, the whole thought of running. I was like, I can't represent a party, right? And I decided to represent the people and move forward with what my passion is, which is, again, representing the people. So my thoughts of, you know, what I thought politically before I thought about running, then going through the last year and a half of all this stuff that's been happening, and then today, my view of politics really changed. What was your views before, during, and now after the situation?
So before, I believed that the things that you saw on TV were real and that people were truly there to fight for people. Now, no, it's all fake. It's 100% fake. It's all a show.
You know, if that ain't the truth, this cycle in particular, I agree with you, Tim. Watching some of the incumbents work, and I use that term loosely, and then watching them realizing they actually have to work because someone like yourself is stepping up and saying, look, stuff needs to get done. It's not getting done right now. To watch these people shift their messaging, not just on the conservative side, but also like the liberal side. Both sides are dealing with this. All of a sudden, it's like, oh, wait, there's a threat, right? And then when the threat is assessed to be enough, and Tim, this kind of gets to the root of your case, because we want you to talk about the lawsuit and everything, is that when you apparently hit the clear and present danger button for them, then they just throw the kitchen sink at you from the side that you're on. Is that right?
I think that I think that the establishment looks at this as strictly a business proposition. And what's cheaper, to take me out on the front side or deal with me 6 years down the road like they had to do with an Anthony Sabatini and spend 7 figures to take me out?
Wow, that's true. So the reference of ads that ran during the primaries for the congressional race in District 7 here in Florida, there was a lot of money that was put into anti-Anthony Sabatini ads. This is what Tim is referencing, and it was what, $1.3 million?
Yep.
Yeah.
Within in 2 weeks.
2 weeks.
Wow. So my heartbeat is, what are we as a people going to do about this treasonous runaway government that we have, and what they're doing and how they're controlling everything? You know, how do we rally people together and go, we don't like what we're seeing and we're calling BS on it? What do we do?
So I think at the end of the day, it's really get involved with your local state candidates, your state house candidates, and give them your time, talent, or treasure.
Mm.
Because the federal government only derives its power from the states. So state level government is more important in my mind than the federal level at this point in time.
So I got a question for you. I would love to see DeSantis turn around and take away our statehood. He can do it with an executive summary, real quick, and create us being a Republic of Florida again. How do you feel about that?
You know, I haven't really looked into that. I would really prefer at this point that we just really put some teeth in that 10th Amendment and just tell the federal government, hey, stay out of here.
I go.
Mhm. So Tim, we're good friends with Drake and Valerie Wirtz, and they were also featured in the piece in the Epic Times. The story that Drake told about being approached by someone in the GOP and having a breakfast was shaking, right? So it's the stuff that you hear about that you don't really believe is true. But I guess though that what he went through and what you've gone through, a lot of the stuff that you hear is rumor or you think is just kind of the smoky room dealing of legend is actually true, right?
Absolutely. And I can tell you, and I won't mention names, but there was another state house candidate that was approached and propositioned, hey, if you'll drop out in 22, we'll guarantee you a free ride in 2024. We'll guarantee you a clear path in. And this particular candidate did drop out.
Wow.
Now I have to do my research, figure out who it was.
Well, even in 2020, we saw that with some candidates where tough questions were starting to be asked. It's like, are they a plant? Did they take a dive because they were promised something down the road? You know, you don't think this stuff is real, but when you get into the belly of the beast, it is real.
Absolutely. It's nasty. It's a business for these people.
Yeah. Wow.
So how did you feel about the different organizations? You know, who do you feel, you know, felt that, you know, supported you versus who didn't? Who was authentic and then who was full of crap?
I've grown to be a big fan of the Republican Assembly, the FRA.
Mhm.
Great group of people. I know they were really behind Anthony, and I did some poll working for Anthony in the end. The Republican Liberty Caucus as well, I had endorsements from. Great people at the Republican Liberty Caucus. The RECs and the RPOF would get nowhere near me. I actually wasn't even allowed to attend an REC meeting.
Wow.
Why?
In our county, in Flagler County, REC meetings are closed door even in 2022 because of COVID.
Then that tell you everything that you need to know. Like, who's running this ship over here?
But this is a consistency because we're, you know, full disclosure, we're officers for the FRA for Orange County. And we see that a lot, and we've seen that a lot. It's these weird things at the different levels that make you question everything. And one of the contentions we've made publicly is that if we can't keep our own house in order and work the way that we're supposed to, the other side of this thing is just waiting for the opportunity to point out the fact that we can't take care of our own business. And it's super scary, right? The RPOF or the Rex, what they're dealing with or what they're going through. It's like crazy town almost.
Absolutely. It's all just part of the machine.
I was gonna say, what part of it's intentional? And if it's part of the machine, then it's all intentional, right?
Yeah.
We should just, you know, go to the default of, you know, guilty.
Right. It feels like, Tim, and we want to get your take on this too. It really feels like that, where you have to be within your own party. You really have to be vigilant and say, okay, at the very core, what is this organization about? What are the history of the people who are in charge of it? What's going on here before you take a step forward? Because you don't know if it's a landmine or not.
I honestly think that the Republican Party's gotten so far away from its original purpose and intent that it's just completely lost at this point.
Wow. That's a powerful statement.
That's a very powerful statement.
Um,
So what do we do as a people? We just keep supporting the candidates? Do we say, like,
Well, so Tim, we'd like for you to speak to some details of the case, because I think from that we're going to get some solution and direction. So can you walk us through, you know, okay, this happened and you said, wait a minute, something is wrong here. I'm going to take an action, like pick it up from there and walk us through how you got to the point where you filed the action.
So, you know, as I'm driving back from Tallahassee on that day, I stopped at an Arby's to eat. You know, it's a 3-hour drive each direction. So while I'm at the Arby's, I'm still getting texts of checks. And then I started getting, all right, we need to pursue legal action from my friends, the Bowmans. So they connected me initially to an attorney in Florida
Mhm.
who had told me, yeah, we'll take the case. Can you come to Gainesville and meet with us? Yes. So I went to Gainesville to meet. Yep, we're going to take the case. They strung it along for a few weeks. And then at the end of the day came through and said, oh, sorry, we just had a meeting. We don't have the manpower to actually be able to do this. So almost makes you wonder, because the attorney that was going to take the case actually is a chairman of an REC in another part of Florida.
Wow.
Mm.
How convenient.
So at the end of the day, then I was connected to the Dillon Law Group, which is actually based out of San Francisco.
Mhm.
And Harmeet Dillon's group agreed to take the case. So I'm working with Jacob Roth, who's based in West Palm Beach. David Warrington's handling part of it for me as well. So
Mhm.
just a non-Florida group that's a powerhouse.
Harmeet Dillon has done some of the best work I've ever seen, because she worked with Kamala Harris in the DA's office. I'm originally from San Francisco too. So Harmeet Dillon has done some of the best work and analysis on her as a person and just how dangerous she is. Just as a side note, it's so wonderful that they chose to take on the case, because you're getting quality people who actually care. So that said, what is the crux of the case for you? Like, what are you saying? What's the remedy? Let's get into that.
So what we've actually sued in federal court, not state court. We kind of looked at both options and decided that federal was the best option. And we've sued under a violation of civil rights because they illegally disqualified my candidacy.
Hmm.
And in my mind, it's a bigger picture than that. It's not so much a violation of my civil rights, it's a violation of the voters' civil rights.
That's right.
Bingo.
Win or lose, the voters should have had a choice.
Bingo. So that leads back to your question about action steps, Tim. Because we as Sherloc is a research business, we do a lot. We're covering a bellwether crypto case right now, and the ramifications of the decisions are huge. And
Yep.
when we looked at your case and your story, we basically said the same thing. We said, this is a civil rights thing that goes far beyond any candidate, right? This is we the people, literally our right to choose
That's right.
is being arbitrated by people who have a vested interest in a different
That's right.
outcome. So so your case in principle obviously is significant, and it's going to have significant ramifications. What do you think other action steps are for us to take as people who are involved in this process, or who some people are going to watch this and they're going to say, oh my God, I didn't realize this was happening. What can they do?
I think it's just to get engaged. I mean, if you look at our recent primaries that we had in Florida, 30% voter turnout is terrible.
Yeah.
I mean, it's hard to complain about anything unless we exercise our civil rights and our civic duty and get out and vote.
Yeah, I mean, the primary is getting engaged. We dealt with that a lot, obviously, with the stuff with the FRA, and making sure people stay engaged. Like we did some training on that. What are you doing when you're talking with constituents to help them understand the importance of the moment? Because I can tell you this much from our research, the other side of the fence, they are methodical in their ability to stay with people until that ballot does what it's supposed to do, or those people get to the polls.
Right.
Yeah.
So what's next for you?
Yeah.
What are you doing now? What do you plan on doing?
So currently I'm actually in Kentucky door knocking for Senator Rand Paul.
Nice.
Very nice.
So I'm going to stay
Nice.
plugged into this campaign through November, and then we'll figure it out from there. I'm definitely not done. I made the constituents a promise that I was going to be a fighter, so I'm going to keep that regardless.
Nice.
I'll be back in 24. I'm just not sure what capacity. I don't know if it'll be
love
state or federal.
I love the fact that you're supporting him. He's fantastic. What a great guy.
He is a true fighter.
Yeah.
Yeah, Tim, I think it's so important. The example you just gave about what you're doing, you're in another state supporting another candidate who aligns with the interests of the people. Walking the talk, so to speak, is important. So if people want to find you, we're going to link to some of this stuff in the notes for the podcast, but if people want to find you, connect with you, support you in some way, what's the best way for them to do that?
My website, voteforsharp.com. There's actually a full copy of the complaint on the website.
Nice.
We'll be updating it regularly, and actually my personal cell phone number is on that website as well.
Nice.
A rarity today, but really important.
Yes.
When people call and you actually answer. I know Anthony does that too.
That's where the idea came from.
Yeah. That's awesome. So Tim, thank you for being with us on Sherloc's Roundtable. We continue to work to expose the wrongdoing, regardless of where it's coming from. And this case we want to stay with and we want to support as well, because we know what's at stake. And if we get this right, they can't do it again to somebody else.
Right.
And that's really the whole purpose in this lawsuit. I looked at it because I don't have a lot of remedy with this. I've missed the primary. It's not so much for me, but if they're allowed to do it with me, then every Liberty candidate behind me is going to get the same treatment.
That's
Exactly
right.
right.
That's right.
Tim Sharp, voteforsharp.com. Thank you so much, my friend, for being on from Kentucky. We're looking forward to keeping up with what's going on and staying in touch with you.
All right. Thanks, guys.